Today, I'm going to tell you the story of the 1,000-page manual. Did the Mario Kart Wii manual really need to be this thick? Since the dawn of video games, manuals were included alongside software so people could understand how to play or give additional context on things like story. As we progressed into the digital era, so did manuals. Digital games don't come with a box and paper, so everything has to be contained virtually. WiiWare and Wii Virtual Console titles offered an operations guide when suspending the game to fulfill the role of a manual. The DSi didn't feature a suspend menu, so DSiWare titles would have an in-game help button to bring up a guide. For these systems, there wasn't any crossover with games that you could download and the ones you could buy at a store. A retail game was expected to come with a physical manual, so there was no reason to implement a virtual guide. It wasn't until the 3DS where Nintendo made digital guides standard on their devices with the manual button. Now, both digital and physical games would have an e-manual. Only a select handful of 3DS titles didn't implement one, most of which being early retail titles. 3DS games as early as 2011 would simplify the instruction booklet, replacing it with a 4-way folding paper. Games like Super Mario 3D Land, Fire Emblem Awakening, and Mario Kart 7 all had a simplified manual. A lot more information could be packed into an e-manual since their file size was relatively small and could be included with the game data, rather than having to spend money on staples, more pages, and printer ink. There's plenty of good information included in the e-manuals, especially so with pre-installed system applications. Without the e-manual, I wouldn't have known what type of music files were compatible with 3DS sound, or what the best distance was to take 3D photos in 3DS camera. Considering the 3DS is a portable, handheld system, players might not always have access to a retail game's box, so an e-manual that's accessible at any time is quite handy. With the very first NES game I downloaded on my 3DS, Super Mario Bros., I was stuck at the title screen. I had never played an NES game before, and based on my previous history with games, I thought the A button would confirm my selection for one-player game. I watched the attract screenplay and thought that the game was being completely unresponsive to my inputs. I had an idea to back out to the home menu and check the manual to see where I was going wrong. Turns out the start button is actually used to start the game. To younger me, that was a novel concept, when start usually meant pausing a game. The e-manual genuinely did help me out with several games. A few later 3DS releases would include an icon or in-game item that would allow you to jump directly to the e-manual, denoted by a green book featuring a white question mark. This became the standard symbol for the e-manual and would also be used on the Wii U. While playing a Wii U game, if you bring up the home menu, you can access the e-manual. These manuals are set up in a similar page-by-page format that the 3DS uses, but this time, manuals can have shortcuts. Shortcuts can either scroll to a specific point on a page, or jump to an entirely different page. These are useful if you want to quickly find information instead of trekking through multiple pages. Once retail games started to become available digitally on the eShop, it became a necessity to give both physical and digital players access to a manual. The e-manual would be the lowest common denominator. In 2007, the PlayStation 3 started introducing retail games onto its digital store. Since there wasn't a physical manual included with the digital versions, developers began to favor adding digital manuals over physical ones. As time went on, paper inserts for Club Nintendo codes or game recommendations would soon disappear, with the former being printed directly onto the game's art insert. Soon, Wii U and 3DS game boxes would be included with one insert. One piece of paper that told you how to access the e-manual. Digital was proving its dominance. Even after the transition, some smaller developers stopped caring to put together a proper e-manual and only did so out of obligation. Instead of adding proper instructions, there was only legal and support information. By the time that the Nintendo Switch came out, inserts were an extreme rarity. Almost all retail Switch games come only with a cartridge. Right down to the operating system, e-manuals were no longer a standard feature for Nintendo Switch. Despite this, dedicated instructions haven't been completely eradicated. Some games would pack HTML-based guides. The Wii U had experimented with HTML manuals with games like Super Mario Maker and Paper Mario Color Splash, but they weren't considered the norm. These manuals allow for much more creativity in layout, design, and animations. Rather than being confined to the page-by-page format, the layout could be whatever the designer wanted. Completely new graphics, music, and art appear in some of these manuals. There's a lot more passion poured into them. Launchier titles for Switch, such as Super Mario Odyssey, ARMS, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Splatoon 2, all feature web-based helpers, giving a bit more context to actions and gameplay. Some helpers are included in the game files, while others rely on an online website. You can usually tell when an HTML page is being used based on how the game loads it in. There's usually a small freeze to suspend the game before the page appears, and in some cases, they use the standard Switch menu sound effects. Although the helpers try to replicate a game's menu animations and disguise the sound effects, if you pay close enough attention, you can tell there's something off. Websites that require an internet connection are a bit more obvious, since the usual button prompts will appear at the bottom of the screen, and they won't work offline. In some cases, you can bring up the URL with the information button, and even visit it on a standard web browser. New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe features Super Play bonus videos that are streamed online from a website. The DLC bundled Wii U release included all of these videos locally in the game's files, making the size bloated for the digital release, pumping it up to 14 gigabytes. For comparison, the original New Super Mario Bros. U was only 2 gigabytes, and Deluxe is 2.5 gigabytes. ARMS has both an offline basic control guide as well as an online website to view leaderboards, tip videos, and tournament matches. Other developers followed suit by adding in web manuals, like in Sonic Mania or Metal Gear Solid, but it was no longer a requirement to have one shipped with your software on Nintendo's platform. Even still, an effort was made by developers to add these informational guides. By this stage, I don't find the guides to be all that helpful. The content they needed to learn was already explained while playing the game. Maybe if I hadn't played a 3D Mario game before, I'd find the action guide to be more useful in learning the moves. While I love the idea of a Grizzco job manual in Splatoon 2, there's a tutorial on how to fight the bosses when you play Salmon Run for the first time. I definitely appreciate the idea of these guides existing, but I feel they're falling into a similar fault that made manuals go away. Experience is the best teacher, and games have found different ways to educate new players. Manuals and e-manuals alike were useful for figuring out how a game functioned or certain button combinations that weren't explained in-game. As consoles have progressed and design philosophies have changed, it might be better to introduce a player to specific mechanics as they go. There's a chance they could get spoiled by reading the game's manual. Games can dynamically teach players what to do in the context of certain events with button prompts. Tutorials, experience, and discovery let the player know how to play the game without needing a dedicated instruction booklet. The experience can be completely contained within the game. If someone is really stuck on something, a plethora of websites are likely to have a walkthrough to get you past sticking points. Certain developers have made a push to keep information available in this format, but it's no longer expected for a game to have a manual of any kind. Even so, it's interesting to see how e-manuals have evolved and transformed the legacy of print booklets. That still doesn't justify Mario Kart Wii to have an entire page on how to use the Wii menu. Manuals are good, actually.